Welcome back to the parillaworks channel. My name is John. When I first started woodworking, I started with bandsaw boxes, and I thought it was a great entry-level project, and I even did 2 Kickstarters to help fund the shop that I currently have. This box here is the Smile box, and it's the mini version of the original size that I designed about 5 or 6 years ago. And so I had this blank lying around that I never actually cut out, so I decided to take some time in the shop to just mess around and make a little Smile box. So I used a 4x6 shipping label to print out the template because it fits perfect and I can just kind of stick it onto my blank. And what you see here are the important entry and exit cuts for this specific design. And because the box has curves in it, you need to do these little humps for the cuts here so that when you glue the pieces back together, they don't slip in or out. So these will kind of lock the pieces in place as you glue the pieces together, and everything will work out nicely. What I like to use for these mini boxes is a 3/16 inch blade. If I don't have any curves, I'll use a 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch blade, but the 3/16 inch blade is probably the sweet spot for this size box, especially if it has tight curves. And now what I'm doing here is cutting the sides off the drawer, and now I'm going to cut the front and back off the drawer, and then after that I can cut out the cavity of the drawer, and then after that I'll go to glue things back together. Now you can see I marked a line on the drawer that I'm cutting out now, and I just use a pencil and mark in about 1/4 to 5/16 of an inch from the edge, and then round off my corners so that I have a nice rounded inside so it's easy to get things in and out of the drawer. After that I can go over to the spindle sander and sand the inside of the drawer. I'll do a little bit of sanding on the inside of the top and bottom pieces, but I don't want to get too close to where my glue surfaces are because that'll mess up the glue line if you start sanding material away. Now I'm going to glue the top, bottom, and sides together, and you can see how the pieces sort of lock in place. If I didn't make those hump cuts, these pieces would slip in or out as you applied clamping pressure, and it's a real pain in the butt to glue this together. So if you don't do these cuts, you'll probably have to use some sort of super glue to secure the piece immediately. Otherwise, these cuts are pretty much necessary for this specific design. Next I can glue the drawer together, and I'm using this little glue bottle that I've been using for my mosaic, and it applies a small amount of glue in a precise way so that I can kind of manage the squeeze out here. And I just try to align the pieces as best I can and add some clamps. There's not much to it other than to not use too much glue so you don't have to clean up too much later on. I dug through some of my old photos and found these pictures from the Kickstarter as I was making all the boxes. I ended up making close to 200 boxes, both mini and original size. And the funny thing is I bought my CNC for this specific project thinking I was going to cut out all of these legs and handles on the CNC, but I ended up cutting them all out by hand because I didn't get the machine set up in time. You can see the Smile handles being glued on here with a stack of lumber underneath being ready to mill later on. In this next shot you can see a stack of Smile boxes all ready to go. I offered walnut, cherry, purple heart, wormy maple, you name it. There was a lot of options in this Kickstarter, and it did pretty well, and like I said, it funded my shop. And you can see here's the family of Smile boxes as they were getting photographed and ready to ship out to their customers. I did a ton of the Smile boxes. That was the most popular one. And this next one here is the Scallywag design. I haven't done this on the channel before, but this is my favorite design to date. It's a little interesting and contemporary, I guess, but maybe I'll do that in the future if I find some time. Though I haven't done a mini version of it. I think it's a little too complicated to do a mini version of. But lastly, here are all of the blanks from the inside of the drawer cavities that I stacked up. And I didn't really do much with these. I think I ended up throwing them away, sadly. Just like earlier, I'm using a shipping label to put my template onto the workpiece here, and then I'm cutting it out at the bandsaw using the same 3/16 inch blade. This is probably my least favorite thing to do, is cut out these mini handles, and that's kind of why I got the CNC, because I thought I was going to be making these for the rest of my life. Anyways, if you have a scroll saw, it might be a little bit safer, but if you just take your time and use a zero clearance table underneath the workpiece, you should be okay. Just kind of take your time and be careful. I get this question a lot, and that is if it's okay if you make these boxes and sell them, like with this design. It's perfectly fine with me. I love when people make these boxes and share them with me. It's exciting to see this design all over the place. The templates are available on my website for free to download. They've been there for a long time, so feel free to go download those. Just if you want to make this size, print it at 50% size and you should be good to go. I would recommend using a blank that's at least an inch longer than the template, just so that you have enough space to do those hump cuts that I mentioned earlier. I've mentioned this in my past bandsaw box videos, but I prefer to leave the back off of my blank to start with and then glue it on at this point in the build, as opposed to starting with a full blank, resawing the back off, and then gluing it back on. It's just less work at the bandsaw with the resawing and everything like that. Now you will have a drawer that's not as deep, just by like a 1/4 inch or so, but it's not a big deal. These are more form over function anyway, so I think this is the best way to go. Once the back dried, I could cut out the final shape back at the bandsaw. I have a 1/2 inch blade on here now, and that's just because I was doing some resawing for a separate project, so you'll be more than fine using the blades you were using for the previous steps, though a 3/8 or 1/2 inch blade can get the job done on a box this small for this specific step. Over at the edge sander, I can get the main part of the box cleaned up. Now this is a pretty aggressive sander, so I had to be kind of careful here, but I would suggest getting something like the rigid sander that has the belt sander and spindle sander built in one. I use that for all the boxes I've made in the past, and it's really handy, especially at the price point that it's available at. It can do a lot for these types of boxes, especially this design that has the inside curves, which a spindle sander is pretty valuable for that type of thing. So now I'm getting the drawer fitted here because it's going to be the same size as your opening, so you do need to take some material off the top and bottom to get that perfect fit, and you really want to take delicate passes. I try to sand the back part of the drawer first to get that to fit, and then I'll start finessing the front face of the drawer to make sure that that reveal and the gaps are nice and even. Staying at the spindle sander, I can get the legs and handle smoothed out. If you can't tell, there's a lot of sanding involved with bandsaw boxes because you're making all your cuts at a bandsaw, so that's not going to be a finish ready cut, so you're going to have to smooth that out one way or the other. So like I said, a spindle sander is going to be handy. I probably should have used a larger drum for all of these sanding operations, but for some reason I did not swap it out. But if you just take delicate passes, you should get there eventually. I did a little bit of hand sanding to ease the edges and smooth things out to the final grit, which was 220 in this case, and then I can glue the handle and legs on. Using that same glue bottle, I just applied a few small dots of white glue and then a few dots of super glue, and the super glue is going to hold this in place quickly, and then the regular wood glue will do the long-term holding of the handle to the drawer. And I'm just doing this by eye, trying to center it as best as possible, and then applying some pressure until that super glue can set up. The same situation for the legs here, although I will apply one clamp to each leg. I'm going to apply that clamp to the middle of the leg, and it'll sort of act as like a spring joint to the middle of that leg, joining to the bottom of the box. And this is just the way I've always done it, doing it by eye. You might get a little bit of wobble afterwards, but it's easy enough to sand that over a flat plate and sandpaper to get everything nice and steady. Lastly, I can apply some finish. In this case, I'm using Mahoney's Walnut Oil, which is a really good light-duty finish, especially for this type of project. I only did one coat because this box is just going to sit somewhere in the house for the rest of its life. But a second coat definitely won't hurt if you intend on selling these. And here's the final fit. And here is the mini smile along with some of the other mini boxes I've made in the past. If you want to see some of these other ones made on the channel, let me know. I'll be more than happy to go back and make them again because they are a lot of fun to make. Just let me know which ones you guys are interested in seeing and I'll see what I can do. Until next time, I do appreciate you guys watching. Have a good one.